They're getting a little chased out. Yeah, well, they were talking about still work. They were talking about network. She just switched from chemistry to business, and now she feels like she's all the time.
Really? We were there till like 10. We were on the beach from like 12 to 7. Like the sunset while we were there. The weather, the water was really, yeah. It was horny, that sunny outside of JP. Their exterminator came today, and like without them even telling me, he's like, you got a forge huge hornets nest like right there.
Well, no,
It's hornets, that might have been why they reacted
actually.
so
She was like, well, she's gonna come back and take it.
Did it hurt really bad?
Take it. Doesn't course at
What?
in the summer.
I didn't cry then, I cried once I got home. And like took my biker shorts off and walked back. But when I was there, I was just like,
Yeah, so.
yeah, that
Yeah.
they don't wear sushi. They want to be a full.
Yeah.
But the girl I saw when I went to my neighbor, she was wearing legs.
Yeah.
But you can have them.
Tabernacle sound. Once he gives us the hello on the sound, then we'll.
We're not on tabernacle.
I guess at least it's 90%.
And what does he do? He's teaching challenge kids. Of course, he has.
It's all super judges.
They're not gonna judge. I'm gonna take notes about what you
City
do.
administrators don't even come in the room. They don't know what's going on.
How's that sound,
I
Jake?
got a little bird. Me too.
Want me to
It's
test it?
weird. I live in this gym.
Because Derek was telling me, he said,
I need to go up and test.
challenge kids.
The
and
most?
say,
Dad,
Test.
you just had one.
Speaking
Unless
Bible.
the kids are running around in
Speaking.
the hole and cause a big
Speaking.
commotion.
That'll be enough. It's about a 20-second delay for him to hear it.
No, Colin doesn't have a Wait, where's the other seat?
He can sit in my seat. I'm gonna be there.
Oh, I thought.
We got stuck at work.
Oh, so you're like. You just started. Colin can just go for longer.
I always carry 4 or 5 lessons.
Mine's like 8.
I'll tell you that face got to scare the kids.
Well, clearly. Yeah, bring bacon. Where's bacon?
Well, I did ask you when I was packing for camp. I was like, "You bring bacon?"
6:33.
We start now. Like that. They're giving us the sound. Okay, we're good, buddy.
Oh, am I starting?
You're up.
Oh gosh.
Well, yeah, I'll let you.
No.
You want to introduce me? Nobody knows.
Hey guys, online and in person, great to see you tonight. We're continuing our August protocols. Might drip into September a little bit, where we're having 2 people speak on a Wednesday night, just little kind of snippet type things. This week we have Colin McIntyre.
Yikes!
If the McIntyres are watching, they're all getting a good laugh, I guess. We have Colin Swenson, which, if you don't know, is Mariah's husband. So he'll be up first, and I'll be going second. So please welcome him.
Did you take his paper? Did you take it? He's already nervous now.
Hello, my name's Colin McIntyre. Oh, where'd my paper go? Don't do that! Don't do that! I'm gonna preface this by saying I don't do much public speaking, so just bear with me. But I'm gonna do my best. So, when Tony asked me last week what I wanted to talk about, I really started thinking about it, and I know he talked a little bit about it last week, but there's kind of 2 things on my mind that I really wanted to talk about, and we'll see how well I can transition them into each other. But the first thing I want to talk about is something that all of us struggle with at some point in our lives. Anxiety, nervousness, obviously me right now, but it's all right. It's something that I struggle with quite often, but a lot of people at some point in their lives you're going to be anxious or nervous, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do want to open up the floor for a second and ask, what is something that you guys do or something you guys turn to when you're nervous or anxious?
Coffee.
Coffee? Okay. I love coffee.
Cleaning.
Cleaning? Okay. Music? Exercise?
We only let each one-word answers.
Do whatever you want. You want to say something?
I think I try to I focus on 10 things I'm grateful for, and that usually gets me out of a bad cycle.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. What I kind of think of normally, which fits a lot of your guys' answers, is we kind of tend to we tend to turn to comfortable things, things that we're familiar with, whether it be a routine or just like specific things that comfort us in our times of anxiety or nervousness. Another thing that I think of a lot is if there's something coming up that I'm anxious or nervous about, I'll call my parents. My parents, I'm obviously very comfortable with them. They're my parents. They created me. They know me. They have experiences that I may not have experienced, or they may know exactly what I'm going through it, so I'll talk to them. And obviously, another thing that we'll turn to a lot when we're anxious is the Bible. There's a lot of great verses that can help with anxiety, some that I turn to quite often. Specific ones being like Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. There's Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. There's Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord will be God, your God will be with you wherever you go. I've turned to these verses quite often, and I think about them a lot. But don't get me wrong when I say this, there's nothing wrong with these verses. They're in the Bible. I think they're awesome. But sometimes reading these verses is kind of hard to read them and be like, all right, I'm not anxious anymore. Like it's hard to read them because sometimes all it says is, oh, don't be anxious, don't be afraid, be courageous. So how? How am I going to do that? Yeah, that's great advice, but how am I going to do that? There is a passage that I've kind of more recently come across. I've been familiar with it a very long time, but I've been reading it more thoroughly whenever I'm nervous or anxious. And if you guys have your Bibles or your phones, if you want to turn to it, Psalm 139, more primarily verses 1 through 18. It is kind of long, but I'm going to read through it, and I want you guys to listen. I want you guys to listen or read it thoroughly. It is some great stuff. And afterwards, we'll kind of break it down a little bit, talk about it. So, Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, and the darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained me for all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. That is some really powerful stuff right there. David wrote a very beautiful psalm, and there's so many things that you can talk about that you can break this psalm down and talk about so many different things. But it covers so many different aspects of God that when you read it and think about it, it can really only give you peace and comfort. Specifically, I just want to talk about a couple of them. So, God is our Father. And it says that, and kind of prefaces that in verse 13. He intimately knows us and He created us. Verse 13, for you created my inmost being, you knit me together at my mother's womb. What I was saying earlier, one thing I turn to is my parents. They know me, they're familiar with me, they love me, and they know everything there is to know about me. But God tops that. I feel like my parents know me really well, but God knows everything there is to know about me. And that's insane. But before we were even created, God knew us. He knitted us in our mother womb. That is some very intense stuff. We were purposefully made. Verse 14, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Our lives were made with a purpose. Before we were even created, God had a purpose for our lives. Our talents, our abilities, our personalities, everything about us, even our occupations, what we do for a living takes place in the kingdom of God. There's a plan for it. There's a reason for it. God is also in control. Verse 16, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. That is also crazy. God knows everything. God knows before we were created who we were going to be, when we were going to be born, what we were going to do during our lives, and when we were going to die. When I first kind of heard about that verse, it almost made me feel invincible in a way. God has a plan for me. God knows when I'm going to die. I can go do whatever I want. Well, you have to be careful with that. You can't be just let me go step out in traffic. God has a plan for me. This is how I'm going to die. Well, I don't know that. I don't know how I'm going to die, but it is kind of sombering to know that God knows when I'm going to die, and He knows the plan for my life, and it gives me peace. We're never alone. Verse 7, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? God is with us everywhere. One thing I like to tell people when I talk to people, I'm a big talker. I love intimate conversations. I'm a very open person. I love getting personal with people, and if they're comfortable getting personal with me, I love giving people advice. One of the biggest things that I tell people, one of the best advice that I give people, is Satan's biggest tool. Satan's number one tool is telling you that you're alone. Is telling you that what you're going through is so unique, nobody could possibly understand what you're going through, and you are by yourself. That is not true at all. Things that I've gone through, things I've struggled with, some situations I've gotten into, I've been afraid to talk to people about it because I feel like nobody could possibly understand what I'm going through. It's so horrible or so crazy that why would somebody understand what I'm going through? But then when I break down and I talk to somebody, they're like, oh, I completely understand that. Or I know someone who's going through that. God put people on this earth that understand you so that you can talk to them. But also God knows us. God is with us. God is familiar with any situation that you could get into, that you can always turn to Him and He will know what is going on in your life. In Ecclesiastes, nothing is new under the sun. Every situation has been gone through at some point in time. You are not alone. God is always with us, and there is nowhere we can turn to that He won't be with us. So, and that's just a few things with this psalm that I love. There's so many different things that you can look at. It's awesome. But this passage gives me so much comfort, knowing that God is so powerful, so awesome. He created us. He loves us. He is our Father, and He is on our side. It just gives me this great comfort also, like this passage, it gives more meaning for other verses for me. There's one, Jeremiah 29:11-13, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. I've thought about that verse all the time, and it's been great for me. But after reading this, it just gives so much more meaning to me. It makes me think about these passages so much more. And I mean, that's just personal for me. I mean, you guys don't have to agree with me, but that's just how I feel. I love Psalm 139. Now, on the reverse side of it, God knows everything about us. He is so intimately knows everything about us. But we only scratch the surface of what we know about God. God, you may feel like you know what God is. God is love, God is mercy, God is just. But that's kind of like putting him into a box and saying, oh, I know what God is. Well, that's not true. Like, you may know aspects of God, but God is so much more than what we might think that he is. Now, my point being to this is that we always need to continue to learn about the Bible and learn about God. We can't just stop where we think we know about God. There is I guess let me preface this with a quick question. You just raise your hand or you don't have to. Have you ever gone to a church service or a Bible study and someone started talking about a certain verse or a certain story, and you're like, oh, well, I've heard this a million times, I don't really need to pay attention. You kind of tune out a little bit. I mean, I feel like everyone's been in there at one point. Well, there was a woman that I used to work with down at Harding. I heard her, she was older. I heard her say one time, my husband and I aren't going to go to church anymore. We don't really need to. We've heard everything. I feel like I know what the preacher is going to say. All of these sermons get coming right around, and I hear the same ones preached over and over again. I'm not going to go to church anymore. I know it all. That is some small thing right there that you feel like you can go, you cannot go to church anymore because you feel like you've learned it all. Like you're never going to learn it all. God always wants us to strive to learn more. We're always learning new things in our life, and we're always understanding things in different ways. God sometimes he'll wait till certain times in your life to reveal things to you that you may not understand, or if there was a Bible passage or a story that you thought you were super familiar with, that you understood what it meant. But there might be some time in your life later down the road where God's like, that's not what that means, but this is what it means. You're not going to understand it this way. He might put some situation in your life where now you're starting to understand more. But if you close your mind off, if you stop thinking, oh, I don't need to learn anymore, then that's not going to happen. You're just going to continue on with what you think you know and live by that, but you're never going to keep learning. There is a TV show that Mariah and I just finished watching, and it's an amazing show. It's called The Chosen. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with the show, but if you're not, it's a very fantastic show about following the life of Jesus and the disciples. It's a very, very, very good show, and it is very unique from what I've seen in other movies and other TV shows. But there was an episode following Nicodemus and talking about his life, and there was a scene following kind of John 3 where Nicodemus and Jesus were talking, and it was when Jesus was telling Nicodemus about baptism and how to become a Christian. And Nicodemus he has this high position in the Sanhedrin, and he knows so many things about the Jewish law and the Torah, and all these Jews are coming to him like having questions, and he knows everything. But then he talks to Jesus, and he knows nothing, or he's very limited with what he understands. Oh, I need to be born again? Well, my mother's dead. How am I going to be born again? And there's just so much about it. And Jesus says, well, you have this high position in the Sanhedrin, but yet you know nothing. You're this old man, and you have so much wisdom, but yet there's still so much more that you can learn. Let's see. There's another scene in that show, a little later on in the show, that Jesus is preparing for his Sermon on the Mount, and Matthew is listening to his sermon, and he's not really understanding the full fledge of what he's saying, like all the parables, and he's like, well, why do you have to tell it in a parable? Why can't you just say flat out what you mean? And Jesus says, well, not everyone is going to understand what I mean. It will make sense to some, but not to others. But Jesus doesn't want a passive follower. He doesn't want things to make sense to everyone, where you can just read it and be like, I got it. He wants people to dive into the Word and try to figure out what it means and what it says. He wants people to be purposefully seeking the truth and understanding. He wants people to peer into the Word and pull out the truth and actively engage with it, putting it into practice in their lives, and then sharing it with people who may not understand what it means. What I love about The Chosen is it's such an interesting perspective on the Bible, and just seeing it on screen. I mean, I love watching TV, but it kind of engages my mind in a different way than just reading the Bible. And it helps me understand different verses and different stories a lot differently. And whether or not it's true, if it happened that way, it opens my mind to the way it could have been, or the way things are meant to be. And it just makes my mind start working like, oh, is that what that means? And it just is so cool. And like, I'm continuing to engage my mind with God's Word by discovering these different paths. So, God is all powerful. He created us. He loves us. He knows our future and what we will do. So we should not be anxious about anything. But if we are, it's okay. God is always with us. God is in control, and He's always with us. He needs, but we also need to strive to always learn and stay active in His Word, regardless if we're familiar with the stories or not, and if we think we know what's going to be said. So we need to actively learn and always try to approach the Word from a new angle, just so that we can keep our minds fresh and learn everything we can. Thank you. Wow, that's great. I wish a lot of our young men would step up and give it a try. And thanks for doing that. So we'll just go another 10 minutes here as we hit the 7 o'clock. And Colin talked about how we tend to go to familiar things when we're stressed or uptight or nervous. And the person who was supposed to do the second part of this tonight, last minute kind of got stuck at work. And I go to familiar things too. In my Bible, I carry around a couple of extra lessons. So I'm also living out what Colin said there. But the ones I carry around are some of my favorites, so I hope you'll enjoy this last 10-minute little snippet as well. So it's actually called 3 Conversations with God. And we probably only have time for one conversation tonight, but you can continue your conversation with God whenever you want, of course. But just looking at 3 different conversations that people in the Bible had with God. Did you ever wish you could talk directly to God? Now, usually somebody goes, I can pray. So go ahead, get me. Did you ever wish you could talk directly to God?
I could pray.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And what a blessing, huh? You probably can't even get have a conversation with the governor of your state, but you can have a conversation with the God of the universe. So what I'm really saying is I bet that prayer, being mainly one-sided, though of course there are ways to be open and hear what God's saying through His Word, I bet there was a time in your life that you did wish that you could actually have a little bit of a give and take. Ask a question, get a specific answer, just like you would if you were talking to somebody next. I bet that happened. Can you share a time when you really would like to have known, when you really would like to have done that? Or just what question do you think you might ask of God? While you're thinking of that, I used to watch Saturday Night Live back high school, college age. I hear it's still out, but I don't know if it's funny anymore. It's a big debate, right? Whether it's still funny. And I remember though it was Chevy Chase, and he had died. And he was in kind of a Garden of Eden type place, and he was in a white robe and had the wings, the whole thing. And somebody comes out, and Chevy Chase says, "Oh, are you God?" And the guy's like, "No, just somebody here to help you transition." And this person's in white, has wings too. So the guy said to Chevy Chase, "Do you have any questions?" And Chevy Chase said, "Do you mean I can ask anything, and I'll actually get it answered?" And it's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Wow. I always thought I had questions, but now that I'm faced with it, I don't know." So he says, well, what's the most disgusting thing I ate and didn't know it? That you could depend on Chevy Chase for a good question like that, right? And the angel does a little thing, and he says, well, if I told you the most disgusting thing, you would just freak out. So I can't tell you that, but I can tell you the 78th most disgusting thing you ate. He's like, all right, it was a spider or something. And it goes on that way. You know, what's the closest you ever came? What was the closest I ever came to dying and I didn't know? So he goes through all these weird things, and he can never tell him the closest. He can only tell him like the 400th closest time, or else you'd freak out. So now that I gave you a few minutes to think, if you weren't too focused on Chevy Chase, you know, what are some things that you wish God could really answer you about, or what's something that you might ask God when the opportunity comes up, and it will? Yes, Chris.
I guess, you know, maybe I don't want to know because maybe we're not supposed to know, you know, and it's better not knowing everything. But like, I'd be curious why there's like these unspeakable tragedies and horrors and like, you know, this stuff that's going on with Afghanistan with the people getting on the plane. So I was just reading about that, and then they were telling a story about this lady that was took off from Vietnam back in the 70s, like the same kind of thing, where like this mass evacuation, and she was in this plane with like 150 infants, and the plane crashed. You know what I mean? So like, you know, not that I need the answer. It doesn't change my faith or anything, but you know, it would be kind of nice to know why like there's these horrific things happen.
Yeah. Good one. Yeah, Pop.
I just always think, well, I'm going to ask God this and that, something else, you know. When we get to heaven, we're not going to ask him anything. We don't need to ask him anything. It's all going to be there. And if it's not there, it's not going to make a bit of difference. He's God. We're man
Yeah.
and woman. But I just think that's the way it will be.
Yeah.
We don't need to ask him anything.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're hearing at home well, but the questions are centering around why do horrible things happen? And both of the people said, well, you know, even if I knew, it's not going to change my faith, but, you know, hey, maybe I'd want to know. So that's kind of what they're circulating around. Somebody else. This side of the room's been heavy. Anybody got anything on this? Yeah, Tom.
So I don't have like a specific question, but I remember laying up at night when I was probably starting in middle school, and I used to think, oh, I'm going to start this little database of questions, because I'm obviously going to inevitably forget when I get to heaven what I can ask God. But God is outside of time and can remember everything. And so I used to just ask questions and be like, all right, remember this one. And then I used to think, all right, when I get to heaven, let's just go through them all and answer the question. And it used to be dumb things like, who am I going to marry? And like, I mean, but I do know, I used to ask some good questions. And I forget them now, but God remembers them. And I used to think, oh, when I get to heaven, we're just going to sit down and have a conversation of what all those questions were.
That's spectacular. And there are good psychologists in the Camden County area. Dave, did you have one?
No, I was fixing myself.
Okay. Anybody else? Question that you might ask God, or something you wish you kind of remember, like, oh, I wish God could have answered me then. Yeah, Larry.
Well, it's a little. Well, for instance, I would like to ask him how my loved ones have passed on, how they're doing.
Sure, you're not the only one. Talk about if you didn't hear online, he's asking about how his loved ones who've passed on are. Yeah. So this first conversation, most of us, I think, maybe just offhand, if you ask friends at work, they'd say, "Yeah, I got a few questions for God." But the thing is, when we look at some of our compatriots back a while ago that actually had a give and take conversation with God, I don't think it actually went the way they thought it would go, because God has a way of, you know, cutting to the heart of the matter. And as you go into a conversation with God, I'm not sure that we're really in touch with some of the deeper things that are going to come out of it. So if you just said, yeah, I'd like to ask God some questions, I think that we might see some of what Dad said there. Is like, you're going to be like, all right, I'm just glad I'm here. Let me just move in, you know, kind of thing. But the first conversation we'll do here in about 5 minutes and then wrap up is a conversation that God had with Cain. So even if you're not a Christian, haven't been to church, there are a lot of people in the world who know the general story of Cain and Abel. So Cain and Abel were two of Adam and Eve's kids, so some of the first people on the planet. And Cain killed Abel because he was jealous of him. So God actually has a conversation with Cain about this. And again, even if you didn't come up reading the Bible, some guy on the street, somebody you work with, might know that that's when Cain said, "Am I my brother's keeper? Why should I know where Abel is?" Because God asked Cain, "Where's your brother?" And Cain had killed him. And Cain's answer is, "Am I my brother's keeper? How do I know?" So this is a really well-known story, but I bet the things we'll talk about here in the next 4 minutes or so aren't as well known. So let's read it. Genesis 4:2. Now Abel, one of the brothers of one of the sons of Adam and Eve, Cain's brother, he kept flocks. And Cain, he worked the soil. So in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil and offered them to God as a sacrifice. And Abel also brought an offering, very fatty portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. So the Lord looked with favor on Abel's offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain got angry and jealous, and his face was downcast. So that's something just on the surface that we can all relate to, right? Two people do what they think is the same thing, and one of them is very successful and the other one not very successful. So Abel, the good brother, gives his best to God. The fatty portions, even though Bill, who hates the fatty portions of steaks, that's actually where the taste and the sizzle is. So Abel gave the best to God. And Cain ends up that he was giving kind of the leftovers, the stuff he didn't really want anyway. Some of the stuff that Nelson has warned us not to donate to the food pantry here. So that's what Cain did. And God was happy with Abel giving his best, and God was not happy with Cain, who didn't give his best. So the Lord said to Cain, because Cain says his face was downcast. Another way of saying that he was upset, right? Then the Lord said to Cain, so here's our conversation with God, right? Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, your offering will be accepted too. God's not playing favorites here. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. So here's the advice that really trickles up the years and is very applicable to us. Direct advice from God on sin. He says it's crouching at your door. It desires to have you. I mean, that's some powerful wording there. It's not be careful of sin, you'll do bad. What's the word here literally that God is doing with sin? What is he making sin here? He's saying sin has desires. I'm looking back here. He's saying that it desires to rule over you, and he's saying that sin crouches. What's God doing with sin here? And it's terrifying. What's that? He's personifying sin here. He's making it like an animal who will crouch. And when an animal crouches, what's he about to do? He's going to try to eat you. And he says that it's crouching and it has a desire for you. So that's some terrifying things about sin here. And he says you must rule over it. Look how God characterizes the sin here. First of all, it's causing anger and sadness. He's also saying you can do right, but you're choosing not to. So he said, Cain, like we want to have this conversation with God, but God's going to cut right to it. He says, Cain, you know what you're doing wrong. I have an idea. Why don't you do what's right, and I'm going to accept you just like I accept your brother Abel. The sin, Cain is keeping back the good stuff so he can sell it or whatever they did with it back then, right? But it really ends up just causing Cain anger and sadness. God says, look, you know you can do what's right, and you're not doing it. That's on you. And it's also saying that sin crouches like an animal ready to strike. It desires to have you. But you can rule over it. Struggle with sin for rule of your life. And someone's going to be in charge. You're not going to come to a peace with sin. You're either going to rule over it by the power of God, because he says you can. He says you can rule, you must rule over it. So you're either going to rule over it by the power of God, or it is going to rule you. So there's not going to be a happy medium. There's not going to be, well, I'll sin a little, and sometimes I won't, and I'll go to church, but sometimes I'll do this. God said that's not one of the options. You rule it, or it's going to rule you. And I bet, if you think about it, that's really the way it is in your life, isn't it? You really, it rules you. You can't stop. You can't control it. Or you've got control over it through God. So our first conversation with God here, God cuts right to the chase with what's really going on. You tried to do yourself a favor by giving me the bad stuff, but you're angry and you're sad. It's on you because you can choose to do what's right, and I will accept you. And man, you gotta choose. Rule over it or be ruled by it. There's just a saying, it's not biblical, and it's if you dance with the devil, he's gonna lead. We can't play this game with sin. So that's conversation one with God. Very insightful, as you would imagine that a conversation with God would be. And I always learn a lot when I read over those verses. So thank God for that advice. Wouldn't it be cool if we could take it?
Wow, 2 powerful lessons, man. Very personal, very different, too. That was outstanding. Boy, if you're not here, what you would miss. If you're not watching, what you would miss. Vivian, do you want to come on forward here? Oh, yeah, come on up. Just as a neat surprise, they say some things, great things come in threes. Colin, Tony, and then Vivian, unless it's a strike, I guess. 3 strikes. But Vivian is going to wrap us up with a worship song. And I've been looking forward to this all week. Okay. On my walks, I've been whistling the tune.
Wow. Bill asked me if I would sing something on Sunday, and of course I hesitated. Since my choruses, all the singing has been delayed because of COVID, so I haven't been doing a lot of singing. But he said, you can sing anything you want to. But he said, I was thinking about Rock of Ages. So I said, I don't think I haven't done it as a solo. He said, well, sing anything you want to. So when I went home, I was thinking about it, and I said, let me take the songbook and decide what I'm going to sing. And believe it or not, when I opened up the book, just like that, the book was staring at me. Rock of Ages.
Wow.
And then when I came tonight, I didn't have my same songbook, so I got one of the church books. And I opened up the book. What was it? Rock of Ages. So I said, wow, I think I'm supposed to sing that. So I'll give it a shot. Rock of Ages, collect for me
heaven and earth kind of cross there, and you see when the kingdom is really here. Thank you, Vivian. Some of the verses I didn't even know were in there. That was great. For clothes, naked I come to thee. For dress, that's awesome. That was a real treat, Vivian. A couple of announcements to wrap up. First Sunday is coming up soon at our house. First Sunday of every month we'll be having a get-together at our house. First one was kind of rained out, but then some came anyway, and it was like a bit of a soft start, which we ended up having a great time. The men's retreat is coming up October 1st at Manatani, which I'll be going to that. I really enjoy these. Jake might be going with me. I really enjoy staying in the cabins, the open air. This time it won't be with a bunch of 6 and 7-year-olds from Ryan, Colin can go. So October 1st, that first weekend in October. Guess who the main speaker is? Karen, you're the main speaker? For the men's? Oh, Mark Finn, that's correct. So Mark is the main speaker, and the title of the weekend is Grit. True Grit. I was wondering if he'll be done his book by then. Maybe he'll be hawking the book at the retreat. Hey, I want to say hi to people online. Michelle, Betsy, Nelson, Cindy, Terry, Sandy. Prayer requests. Larry's moving this weekend, so we're praying for ease of that. I know it's been stressful, Larry. Some of us will be helping you move. I think Jake's in on that. Mr. Was this Cheerio guy, or what is that? Cinnamon Toast Crunch Man. And Sandy's hand, I believe, is healing well. Pray for Mark and Becky on the sabbatical. Pray for Colin, who's starting college at Wesleyan, and Nikki's at college. Elizabeth's going tomorrow for the orientation send-off, so a lot of big, great things. A friend of mine, Olivia, is praying, asking for prayer requests, just living in South Africa. It's devastating there with so many things. She was asking for requests. Anyone else have prayer requests that you'd like to bring up to the Lord there? Do you want to say a few, Jake, that were online there? Can you see any? Say, Vivian, I think, has gotten better since the last time I heard you. It was fantastic, man.
Dan Eisenbach said my brother has been moved to rehab.
Oh, good. And that was the hope on Sunday, that Dan's brother's in rehab now from COVID. He was in the hospital for quite a while. Joy, which is Dave's friend, he's been praying for. And then, what's that?
Her brother Stefan.
Stefan.
He's having some complications with diabetes, as it turns out.
Oh, gotcha.
That's what that whole episode was driven by. So.
Gotcha. Well, good to find out.
Yeah. He's back here in New Jersey, so it's good. And the main thing is it's a good source of outreach. I get to talk to her about it. She's very thankful for the prayers and was very honored that I shared it with my church. And I don't really know her faith background, but she said it was a blessing. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing like being with them during tough times like that.
Yeah.
Good. And praying for Sasha, who's now at Harding, I believe, right?
Yes.
Big stuff. Job things are coming along well. Any announcements anybody want to make? Are you good for now?
I accepted a job yesterday.
All right, Mariah accepted a job yesterday as a doctor of physical therapy. So if you have any aches and pains, schedule an appointment in Vineland. What's the name of the place?
Ivy Rehab.
Ivy Rehab. Wonderful. Congratulations. And I know as Colin is looking for the police work, he's accepted a job at Camp Manatani as the head chef. So if we go to that men's retreat, maybe you'll be.
I might be cooking.
That's right. All right, great. Excellent. So a lot of great things. Colin's had a great reputation at camp for decades, and it's neat that they tap him for several things. Anyone else, Jake?
There's also Michelle Miller says prayers for the Sherry family.
Okay, prayers for the Sherry family. As you may have heard, Anna Sherry passed away. So keeping her in that whole family in our prayers. And is there anything else, anybody?
Margaret is really connected with all the missionary work that they're doing, and the Haircuts for Mission is supporting a lot of them, I know. And I don't know all their names, but I think one of the sons, he last minute decided to go to Harding, so he's actually a sophomore at Harding. He started, and I think he's an accounting major, so maybe him and Sasha will meet up. But just prayers for him as he kind of jumped on to Harding last minute.
That's great. Is that what's the
His name's Hector.
And it's the dad is Cesar.
Maybe.
Wonderful. Okay, gotcha. Try that.
It's related to all of them.
That's great.
Margaret told me he started. Yeah.
And Margaret and Bibi had asked for some funds from the church to help Cesar travel some throughout his country to see a lot of family members. Some had passed away during COVID. He hadn't been able to see his parents in a while. So a lot of your contributions and from the special collection back in the fall helped fund some traveling he's going to be doing within a couple weeks. So that was a great, great blessing. He asked for $600, and the church gave him $1,000 to give some extra to help them survive and do whatever they need. So that was really exciting to be able to do that. Anything else, Jake?
Dee Heisler has COVID.
Thanks, Jake. Dee Heisler has COVID, and we'll pray for her that she heals and gets 100%. Still praying for Phil, who had heart surgery, I guess about 5 months ago or so now. Anything else, Jake? All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for doing that, Jake. All right, let's go to God in prayers. If I don't catch all the requests, they're all out there to the good Lord. You heard your cries. God, we thank you for this Collingswood Church of Christ that you have set up here for your glory. And I pray that we remember that our mission here is to glorify you, and we thank you for our salvation. We pray for all these requests that have come in from Cindy and Dee and Dan and on for Joy. We pray you bless the missionaries that we have with Cesar and the family, and that you bless all the people going back to college and those going back to any schooling within the next week or so. We thank you so much for the worship that Vivian led us in here with Rock of Ages. And we thank you that you are our Rock of Ages and that we come to that cross for you. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, everybody. Great Wednesday service, man.